Christina DeRose, and I am the director of Kresge Arts in Detroit. We are, of course, generously funded by the Kresge Foundation and administered by the College for Creative Studies. I want to note a couple of staff members who are here today as well, including Layla Bygorich, and also we have support today from Andrea Ulipodi. So thanks to them for helping everything run as smoothly as it's going to today. And want to note also, if along the way you have any tech challenges, feel free to chat those to Layla, who's also got tech support there in her screen name as well. So we're having another installment today of the Artist Salon series that's been going on this entire month, and we'll have one more coming up later, so keep an eye out for that. Today we get to hear from Bree Gant, Melanie Manos, and Salakastar, which I'm very excited to get to have a conversation there. And of course, these are each folks who received 2020 Kresge Artist Fellowship, so about halfway through their fellowship year right now. And today the combination of artists is really focusing on performance art one way or another, though each artist, of course, taking that in their own direction. So also want to note that we have folks helping out with interpretation. Kim is here now, and later on we will probably have Julie joining us as well. So big thanks also for their support. And we're here with an amazing group of attendees. Thank you to each of you for being here, and we invite you to share your name, your information about where you're joining us from today. And of course, if you've received a fellowship this year or in a previous year or a Gilda Award, etc., please share that as well so that folks can start to know who's here and can make connections among folks. It's not just about the opportunity to hear from the artists who are presenting, but also, albeit we're in a virtual forum, which is a bit challenging, but we want to try to make sure that as many of those relationships can be built or reconnections can happen as possible. And so the chat is a great spot to do that. So in addition to sharing where you're coming from and your name, et cetera, and pronouns, mine are she, her, or they or theirs, also fine. Please as well share any questions along the way that you have for the artists. We're going to go through a format today which will have each artist share a little bit about the video you're going to see about their practice, their work. Then we'll watch the video, then we'll have about a 10-minute Q&A with that artist. And then we'll have the second artist present after that. Then we'll have a quick break. Then we'll go back and have the third presentation, and then we'll wrap it up. So while you're watching the videos, you can go ahead and share information, questions that are coming up for you in the chat at that time. You don't have to hold your questions till the end. And then we will moderate that Q&A afterwards. That's the basic format of what's happening. Also note that the video, in case sometimes people have a little bit of a challenge playing the videos in through Zoom or seeing them, depending on your connection. So there'll be a link dropped in the chat also. So you can, if you want to pop out, watch the video and come back on the same time and check the Q&A. We will certainly let you in and out of the room as needed. So I think that's it, and it's my pleasure now to hand it over to Bree Gant to give us a little context for the video, and then we'll jump right in.
Hey, what's good, y'all? Really grateful to be here with you and excited to see so many people I know and don't know in the chat room. I'm Bree Gant. I'm from Detroit, living and working here currently, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist working in performance, dance, film, photography, mixed media collage, and installation. The video that I'm showing today is it's a couple work sample clips from like process and test shooting, and I'm speaking over it, talking a little bit about my inspiration and influences.
What up, though? My name is Bree Gant, and I am a multidisciplinary artist. I primarily work in photography, film, video, installation, dance, and performance art. I studied film at Howard University, and I am from, living, and working in Detroit, Michigan. I'm very grateful to be here with you, speaking about my practice. I'm sharing a few process video clips and some of my influences and intentions. My art is research, care, knowledge production. I'm interested in self and other. How does our relationship to self affect our relationship to other, to space, to community? I look to figure and movement, history and myth, and social political conflict to study and represent this relationship between self and other. I think I'm called to lens-based media for that reason, the convergence of light and shadow, a veil between witnessing and being. This video is a self-portrait from 2019, shot in Fitzgerald, a Northwest Detroit neighborhood just a few minutes from where I grew up. There's a basketball court somewhere under all that snow. Prior to shooting this, I spent a year documenting the neighborhood, commissioned by Reimagining Civic Commons. I was out documenting one day, and the court called to me. I recorded myself twirling in the snow and continue to revisit these videos to think through editing and composition. Also in 2019, I spent a year with The Gathering, organized by Hard Dance Stories and Daring Dances. We spent a week in residence with New York-based collective Skeleton Architecture, and the rest of the year sharing work and conspiring to build worlds together. My life and practice were transformed by these groups of womenfolk. I was introduced to performance art rooted in radical Black feminist thought that illuminated pathways I've long been working in, and also offered historical and contemporary frameworks to better understand where I am and where I'm going. I'm also deeply inspired by filmmakers Jatavia Gary, Jen Nkiru, Naima Ramos Chapman, Arthur Jaffa, and Isaac Julian. They experiment with and push the boundaries of form and stay in conversation around Black cinematic grammar and care. This is test footage, shot in 2020 in collaboration with dance artist Celia Benvenuti and documentarian Devin Drake. We were just off the river at a bus stop on East Jefferson. It's informed by the 1947 solo from American choreographer Tally Beatty, entitled Mourner's Bench, and the years I spent documenting the bus in Detroit. I've recently been experimenting with sound. Collaging and displacing with various video clips from my archive. Looking to create unexpected points of connection, dimension crossings, portals. I am currently developing a feature-length experimental dance film, and I spend a lot of time moving, writing, and reading young adult fantasy novels. Check out more of my work and photo archive at gant.studio. I hope to stay in conversation with you. Peace.
Thank you, Bree, for sharing that about your work. And I'm really curious as we see that and we sit with it, knowing that a lot of that, especially beginning with a self-portrait, is very personal, what you're sharing. And I'm curious what that's like to watch that in this moment. And it sounds like it's work that was initially captured some time ago, and just anything that you want to share about what it's like to reflect on it when you look at it now.
It's definitely a little trippy. Most of my work has been autobiographical, and I think sharing personal work, especially right now during the pandemic, is both easier and harder in that it's like this intimate, false intimacy, and I'm still in my home and I'm in the sweats that I woke up in this morning. Put a little mascara on for you guys, and then it's like it's my screen and everything, but I also know that there are I didn't look at the participants. There are 30 other people in here watching this, so it's very trippy to feel both ends of. It's like I'm at an exhibition talk, but from my home. It's hard to balance, but appreciative.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, yeah, I understand that space of sometimes feeling like there's more freedom or comfort sharing, and then also recognizing that there is a false sense of that because people are there. And then in some ways, things are less ephemeral than ever because they're recorded and then they're posted. And so I get the trippy. And as you're looking forward to what comes next, you're working on a feature length dance film you mentioned. How do you see that going from where you are now and the conditions that are the working conditions for artists at the moment, and especially in film and presentation wise? What are the resources that would make that trajectory for you one that could move with the most amount of ease and abundance, including, of course, money, because money is always a first resource that people can use in double the amount, whatever someone may be thinking right now about passing your way. But separate from and in addition to that, what are other things in the world that can help you continue to make the work that you're making and how to present it?
Thank you for that. And thanks for all the love in the chat, you guys. I have been blessed with this Kresge to spend a lot of thought time and writing and research time on this project over the past year. And right now I'm interested in really getting into pre-production and production. So we're currently raising money for the feature film. I'm collaborating with fellow awardee, Gilda awardee, Celia Benvenuti, in order to make this happen and do the choreography. But we're also looking for dancers and movers, as well as rehearsal space. There's a lot of spaces popping up in Detroit, but we also really need, large windows, sprung floor, Marley bars in order to start the rehearsal process. And we want to bring in community members into the space of the dance studio and not just these experimental spaces in order to really get the core of the story and the film down. And then I'm also looking for research partners. I'm excited to be digging into new archives, and we are working from our personal family archives, but I know Detroit and our cultural institutions have a lot of very unique archives for performing arts, for local history, for all that good stuff. So those are the two main things, research and funding.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And with the access to space as well. You mentioned about light and Marley and sprung wood floors. And I'm going to add to that list column free, because those combinations.
Yes. Column free studios.
Right? They are few and far between in the world, and also in Detroit can be particularly hard to come through that combination, both for presenting work, but then also for capturing work and making a feature-length film, which leads to one of the questions in the chat, which is asking for you to share a little bit more about the dance/movement aspect of your work.
Yes. Thank you, Mama Penny, for asking that. Also, shout out to Mama Penny. That's who I got this head wrap style from. Mentor also on the project and in my practice. The movement is informed by the diaspora. So a lot of the technical studying I have been doing is ballet and Dunham. For most of my life, that's most of the technique work that I've done. The rest of my performance has been either very experimental or street dance. Most recently, I've studied with Celia Benvenuti and Penny Gatboldo, Dunham technique, as well as Afro-Cuban. So you'll see a lot of rumba, but it's also, the core of it is still improvisation. And that's a lot of the question of the film and what it's like to move through ourselves and our bodies and to move through the city, and what it's like to be confident and able to improvise our movement through that while following a line that's informed and shaped by certainly ourselves, but a lot of our agency also gets encroached upon by other folks, the built environment, and expectations and assumptions and mythology.
So a question in here, which I think jumps off of what you just mentioned really beautifully, is wondering if there's a sense, sight, sound, taste, smell, feel that leads you, noting that it is very sensory work, what we were able to see and what you shared.
Yeah, definitely riding the bus, which comes with a lot of smells and sights, especially in our city, but it's that experience of finding stillness while being moved, and especially moving the collective. I think there's a energy feel that changes when you're near someone. And I think riding the bus is one of those sensory experiences I do when I get to any new city in order to learn it. And depending on the bus in Detroit is a very specific physical experience of riding in those cloth seats and listening to the various sounds of music converging against each other, whether someone has on headphones or, one of the kids has their radios out. And then the idea of being super close to strangers, and whether you're touching or not, that the feeling, the tingling that you get in your hands from being super close to someone that you don't know and may never see again.
And of course, riding the bus being an experience that many folks are not having at all at this point in a pandemic, and also a very fraught experience about when would one and how and all of the things. It's a particular space that are in this moment, especially a whole different context than when you were shooting the work back. How long ago was it when you were first started working with the bus environment?
I've been working on documenting the bus from about 2012 to 2019 was the core of my work. I haven't been doing as much documenting lately, so it's considered non-essential.
So one of the other notes here is, I love the movement to the sound of the city and how powerful it is. And the question following up on that is, what are you feeling from the city of Detroit? And I just want to tag on that also, if there's anything you might mention in terms of the parallels of moving through the city of Detroit as an artist and improvisation, in addition to what you're talking about in the actual moment of work. But I feel like living in the city of Detroit as an artist is a lot of improvisation on a day-to-day basis. I'm curious if that might link into this question at all in terms of what you're feeling from the city of Detroit at the moment.
Yeah, it definitely does. So that clip is inspired by Mourner's Bench by Tally Beatty. American choreographer, did this solo about the Mourner's Bench in a church. And it's like where you go to let go and move through grief and tighten your grip on hope. And so you're constantly like balancing and moving between these feelings of I have hope, but I'm also carrying all of this grief. And I think a microcosm of that experience is like waiting on the bus. And it's going to come, but it's just in whatever city. I put a lot on Detroit's Department of Transportation, but anytime you're dependent on public transportation, it's like, it's going to come, but it's a lot to hold on to, wait for. And then working through these feelings of grief on any level, sometimes you just have to stop and you have to wait. Sometimes you can't move forward right now as much as even if you want to move forward, like whether or not there's a choice in the matter, sometimes you just have to stop and wait and allow those feelings to move through you. Yeah, I think I answered the question. Were there more parts to that question?
I think that answers the question. And I'm really curious if you've spent time, I think that you have, in cities where they actually tell you how long until public transportation is going to arrive. And then, of course, there's cities where you don't have that knowledge. And I'm really curious how you might find that changes your experience of waiting when there's information that, again, may or may not be accurate, but that adds more information to the experience.
Yeah, I think part of the reason I became so passionate about this project was because I took the bus a few times growing up in this city, but I didn't have to depend on the bus when I was younger. My parents gave me rides. So I didn't start depending on public transportation until I moved to DC, which folks who have been there know that like train system, especially for a subway, is pretty clean. It's pretty efficient. They tell you when the next one is going to come. They long ago had the integrated system where you could use the same card on the bus or on the subway or on the metropolitan area transit as opposed to just in the city. And so moving back home was a bit of a shock when I had to depend on the bus for these past several years, because we just don't, we have such minimal infrastructure. We really just caught up to the starting line, you know, a year and a half ago, right before the pandemic. We just got to a place where we're kind of in conversation with what's happening around the country. And it opened my eyes, especially since the conversation is going to like hyperloops now, where they would like to build a train that you can get from Detroit to New York in what, 20 minutes. And it's like we were never even on the board for the conversation of having a prepaid card that isn't just a flimsy piece of plastic. It's like an actual card that you can continue using for your transit. So it's understanding that where Detroit is as a city. And I think that frustration with gentrification and what rich resources were coming in the city really emphasized the necessity for making this work.
And in making this work, and also what you are working on next, or things that may not be clear where the influence is, but they're sort of in your mind, are there other dance films that you're inspired by that you can share?
Yeah, so many dance films. Some shorts that I love. One I just watched and is only available on YouTube for another couple weeks. It's Kyle Abraham, When We Fell. Search Kyle Abraham, When We Fell, it should come up. A few more recent ones. There are two features that I think are stunning, and it's Pina, choreographer, awesome. I think that was 2011. And then Cunningham on Merce Cunningham is another feature that's really awesome. There are some films that incorporate dance in really cool ways that have inspired me by Naima Ramos Chapman, and that's Pew Pew, and her collaboration with Terrence Nance, Jimmy Must Have Fallen from the Sky, which are really cool. And I could go on for this for days, but I suggest watching the Just Dance series on Nowness. Has so many incredible dance films.
And I want to note, you mentioned Terrence Nance, who's been a panelist in the past. I don't know offhand if it was even the year of your fellowship. I can't remember, but it's always great having these conversations because folks mention others who are, of course, already Kresge Artist Fellows or who have been panelists in the past. And it leads me to thinking about your mention of collectives, right? Also in terms of the influence on your work and the support. And so as we sort of start to wrap up the time that we have for the Q&A, I just want to circle back on that and see if there's something that you want to or could share about your experience of collectives in Detroit specifically, and how that network of artists supporting one another also shows up for you.
Yes, collectives have definitely propelled my practice, and I realized how much of my work is collaborative, and my solo practice is really just the place where all of these collectives kind of overlap for me. But I think generally, because there's new and not that much arts infrastructure in the city, it's almost been a necessity and a catalyst for creating collectives, because we're making the spaces that we want to be in, and we kind of form these collectives in order to do that. Some of them early on have been Art Babes Collective, which was a critique group where we also did pop-up exhibitions. The Gathering, which I mentioned in the video, was incredible, brought together by Jennifer Harge, and we studied for a week with skeleton architecture, and then for a year we just met up and talked about our practices and supporting each other, especially as performance artists and dancers, which is, even though that's pretty much everybody in the city, it's almost like it's harder to find support and access around those two. And then Visions of the Evolution, which was brought together by Sharice Morris, another Kresge Artist Fellow, and performing with Salaka and Morgan, who are here, has been incredible. And it's been so affirming in the work that we're also trying to do to just create the realities that we want to see and dismantle these harmful systems, because we all get to come together with our own individual practices that work together to support something bigger. And it's just been a brilliant lesson in what it means to be an artist. You know, it's not the accolades, not even the finished work, but that sharing of process and the literally creating change in the space around us.
Love that. And as we move on now, we're going to shift. Thank you so much, Bree. I also just want to acknowledge that you're mentioning folks who you've worked with who are fellows and folks who we think of as not yet fellows, right? It's not a hard line. It's just not yet. But we look forward to every year welcoming more and more folks in the circle expanding and the circle of networks. Also want to just acknowledge that many of the spaces that are used for performance art and for dance are artist-run spaces. They're founded and they're kept, those doors are open through a lot of volunteer work or a lot of underpaid work, and through people's love of the form, and that is a wonderful gift from artist to artist, and a place where I hope there will be more opportunity for investment in the future, so that there's more spaces available for folks who make work that require very specific types of support to keep bodies safe and for films to be able to be made. So with that, I'm excited to hand over the virtual mic to Melanie Manos to give us a bit of an introduction to what you have to share with us today. Thank you in advance. And then after you give that context, we'll jump right into it.
Okay. Hi, everybody. That was wonderful, Bree and Chris. What a great conversation. Yeah. And thank you for all the links, tech support group. Greetings, everyone's here. It's great to see you in rectangles, and I hope to see you in person before too long. And so let's see, my practice, I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I was honored with a Kresge Fellowship in 2020 for live art. And performance art was really my bridge from very early training in traditional theater, and then toward improvisation, and then kind of finding sort of the punk rock subcultural music scene when I was living in Los Angeles that kind of saved my life, that was going off the rails. And just the sheer expressiveness of that, and started doing theatrical work that was coming from myself, it wasn't scripted by someone else. And that's where I really started to find my sort of sea legs with performing, and then really got involved. Why am I doing such a long autobiography? Anyway, really got involved with visual art and went back to school to study visual art. And so my practice is multidisciplinary, and working in performance with lens-based, so performative photos and video. I work with a collaborator also as the Manos Bukayos Cooperative. And we work in video installation. Sometimes I work in large scale projection. But I will say also that I have like a daily drawing practice, like getting back to just working with paper, hands-on. I love working digitally, but that hands-on practice is really important to me. Manos is hands in Spanish, even though I'm Greek Macedonian descent. So what you're going to see here is video that I made in my studio, showing you in home all the different things that my home is right now. And it starts with me in my role as my performance as faculty at the Stamp School of Art and Design at University of Michigan. Yeah, that should do it.
Hi everyone, here in my extreme pandemic shield. I'm in the hair dyeing phase right now at the salon, and just wanted to remind you to watch that performance art lecture. It's there for you in Google or wherever your instructor put it, and I hope you like it.
Project I'm working on in studio's my home. My home is my studio. I kind of like it that way. Everything I have could end up in a performance. This is what I'm thinking of, the curation of performance. So these boxes are actually from a performance with this Manos Bukayas cooperative, which is Sarah Bukayas and myself. And instead of keeping them in storage where I had them, I thought, well, they're beautiful, and why don't I been interested in how do you show the ephemera of a performance. And these are from the Swing 'em series. Stepping forward, swinging your ball, going in swinging, there you go. Swing it now, swing it, you got it, yep, and you know what, you're right. If you need to hold them, you do that. Instead of just regular tennis balls, I thought, well, these are more fun, so put those in there. Yeah.
Recently, I went to the DIA thinking about gender bias in the art world, in cultural institutions, in terms of their own staff, in terms of the work that they show. I know that they're addressing it, but it sure is slow going. So here I'm using the super slow-mo kind of sports. Yeah, swinging around the world. And I thought I would pose at the Rodin sculpture, considering the sexual predatory nature of his practice. And in this next piece, I use nylons in a different way to talk about both the freedom of employment that women enjoyed in the early 20th century with department store labor opportunities, but also the restrictions in terms of not being able to move up the ladder. This was performed in a former Sears department store building. I like the idea of the control top pantyhose.
This is based on the gender wage gap. It goes with my outfit. But I decided on this color because it was Trump era, right? Gold, right? So this is called Dill Gappy Dough because you might as well enjoy yourself while getting screwed. Based on the gap, and then turn the gap into a cylinder, and you get a dildo. So there's some starter ones, which I thought might be nice gift object size. I'm liking this idea of appropriating sort of like the gift or the lifestyle thing. I've also got Lofty Bitch bags and coasters. Thinking about are these live, life, love, lifestyle kind of things. And so I thought, oh, I'll make some merchandise that talk about gender discrimination in the workplace. Live, love, laugh. Got a Melanka wig, so I was being like Melania Ivanka? Melanka. This is part of my studio where I do some shooting and overwintered these now spectacular geraniums, and where I recently shot this video. I'm working on a project called Visualizing Women's Work, which addresses the
gender disparity in public monuments. If you look at the number of monuments, for example, in 3 cities, what were the contributions of women and how can those be commemorated? Certainly there are statues of notable women, but they're few and far between. More often, a female figure is a goddess or allegorical figure. The project also looks at the very form of most monuments themselves. So a hierarchical, authoritarian, shall we say, patriarchal style of monument. Can we rethink that very definition of what a commemorative monument can be? And also, in doing so, redefine the heroic. To give a little irreverence, I created Monuments Bingo, thinking that we could have some tours. Participants come and take the tour, or they self-tour and look around their area, their town, their city. Okay, on my bingo card, I've got a horse. Yep, got that. Man, cloak, plinth, and I got it. Weapon. Bingo. All right, you win. So we are looking at how do we redefine that? We must ask how women from all segments of society were working and contributing to the growth of this nation. More often in unrecognized support system roles, both paid and unpaid. This means going beyond nominating singular women in leadership roles, though we like them too. How do we make the invisible visible and elevate the everyday? One way is an interactive website that will invite community participation and collective research to populate the map. Another strategy is utilizing augmented reality via smartphones to convey images and information. A third way is through live activist events, such as a spin-in. It's a big job. We're going to do it.
Okay, so thanks for joining me here at the salon slash classroom slash home slash studio. And get your vaccines and come on over. You can catch me at Insta at Melanie_Manos or email me at manosmel@gmail.com. I hope you are enjoying some springtime. This is from the garden outside. Some hyacinth that smells amazing. And one more performative artifact for you. My life, your life, endurance performances. So hang in there and keep coloring the hair. Who knows what color it's going to be now? And that's the fun of it, right? Okay.
Thanks, Melanie, for sharing so many different views of your practice. Really appreciate it. Excited that, got to start with watching you literally swinging balls and want to start there because I just get to say that and, be paid for asking you questions about, tell me, Melanie, 2020 Kresge Artist Fellows, about swinging balls in front of the DIA and elsewhere.
I mean, it felt good, but, I don't really want to have balls, but, it is a send up, obviously, of when I was growing up, there was a lot of balls talk. It seemed like, oh, it's got, it takes a lot of balls and all that. And where am I in that picture? So some of that comes into that. And then also this thinking about do we try to dismantle patriarchy by following the same path and doing it better, or do we just want to not even follow the same path? So it's all kind of wrapped up in that. And that came about, that's my performative mind. So I had a solo exhibition at the Simone de Souza Gallery, and it was really in response to Trump being elected and then those Kavanaugh hearings, and it bringing up a lot of sexual harassment, PTSD for me, and those images in the show, which I didn't show here, but we're very much wrestling with that, physically wrestling with objects. And so for an evening of performances that were in that space, it was important to me that it all kind of kept speaking to this heavily masculine rhetoric that was going on.
Yeah, and reminder to everyone, feel free to drop questions in the chat, questions, comments, etc. I'll draw from those. In the meantime, I get to ask you the question around resources. In terms of thinking about the projects that you've outlined, and I'm sure there's more than fit into the amount of time for the video today. Those are really exciting and ambitious projects. And I'm curious, again, aside from the monetary support, which is always helpful, always needed, and always needed even more than people might think that it's needed, and more zeros at the end for folks who are going to write those checks, I want to encourage. And also to ask you what other types of resources are helpful for your practice and to bring into reality with ease and abundance, the project that you outlined and more.
Ease and abundance. Yeah, I think one of the things I've learned recently, and some of it has been with some of the guests that Kresge has brought in for us to work with, is this idea of having producers. I'm very used to, like, from my kind of grassroots, like DIY ethic of just doing everything and figuring out my own tech and every single thing. And then sometimes that's just because you're scraping nickels together to make a dime, to make it happen. So, but I realized, like, it's so much better when I can just focus on a couple of things, and performing, maybe script writing, maybe a little bit behind the camera, but bringing in people that have expertise with technology, with actually producing, with social media, with that can, focus on these things. So a lot of it is connecting with those people, which I hadn't really thought about as much, sort of coming from like being a solo artist or two-person collaboration. And with like the visualizing women's work, that needs to happen in sites all over the country, and then maybe in other countries, but it's going to take a lot of collaborators, and it's premised on collaboration. So the idea is for participants, kind of like a StoryCorps thing where people come in and tell their stories, but it being women-centered. So collaborators, producers, curators. I really love working with curators. I love the way they think and what they bring creatively. Yeah, both in our artist-run spaces and museums. I like bridging the high and low as always. I guess I say high and low. I mean, they're sort of categorized that way, but yeah. So, and you mentioned artist-run spaces before, which have been sustained my practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense too, like that space of if you had the support, it means more focus on just the creative practice aspect, less of the other components of I need to also finish the work, present the work, get the audience in to see the work, all of the things that in other industries, if one's an accountant, you do your accounting, unless you're a solo practitioner, right? There's other folks who handle HR, they do whatever the other things are. Like in art, it's often left that it's expected, especially within performance art, within dance, because of the lack of resources, including producers, curators, etc. it can often be a space where it is very DIY, and to the point that we forget that maybe it doesn't actually always have to be that way. And often it's artists presenting other artists' work that provides that peer-to-peer support. Pulling from a question in the chat, there's one that says, how does the punk scene still influence your work?
Yeah, I know. I saw that. I was thinking about it. Uh, it's social commentary. That's really what I took from it. I think so much of my work is influenced by the very smart social commentary I was hearing in the sort of post-punk scene. And some of that was coming from some drag queens that were doing really smart performances. So I think it's that, but also the use of humor. I know there's another question about humor in that, where it was, sometimes people were raging about things, but the most powerful things were couched in sort of the ridiculous, in a sense, like pushing the absurdity of situations, of systems, and then also our own participation in them. So I think that, yeah, great question.
And following up on that, there's a question about the props, because of course they're awesome and loved. Which comes first, the prop or the performance for you?
Oh my God, I'm not sure. The prop or the performance, I just love that. Even just for the alliteration. Oh gosh, is it fair to say like they all kind of come together, they all birth together, I guess you could say. I mean, like with the Dill Gappy Does, it actually started with research on looking at the gender wage gap. That's from The Economist magazine, I guess digital online. They have a terrific, and I don't know if it's explained well, but that's by country. So they really do like amazing statistics, and that's, the ones at the top are like I think that's Iceland, that has almost parity. Yeah, and the US is way down. So that one actually started with research. So I think there really hasn't been a performance with that one. I haven't worked out. So that one, the prop came first. Not there yet. Yeah. Yeah.
And another question here from the chat is wondering how long you've been an educator and how teaching informs your work. And I'm curious also about how the humor and some of the topics that you bring in might be received in a classroom setting, or if there are things that you're like, no, this is for the performance, this doesn't come in a classroom. So yeah, tell us a little bit about how long you've been an educator and how teaching informs your performance-based work.
Yeah. Questions, everyone. I started teaching right after grad school. I was sort of a non-traditional grad student, so I didn't go to grad school right after undergrad, waited about a decade. So I didn't really enter academia as an educator until 2008, which was just after I graduated. And so I've been teaching since then. I will say, in answer to your question about humor and sort of the risque, I guess, aspects of it, it depends on I don't usually do that too much with freshmen. Freshmen, they're so polite, and they really kind of are still following a decorum. And as professors, we do, but like at the stamp school, everyone, they just call us we ask them to just call us by our first names, sort of trying to like dismantle some of the hierarchy. But what I really get, I think teaching is really generative in terms of reminding myself through seeing their process, reminding myself like, oh yeah, this is really good to do more iterations and write stuff down, the things I'm telling them to do, but then also helping. It's really satisfying when you start to see, one, a light bulb go off, and secondly, where you see them and hear them start to kind of blossom into like artists and makers and designers in the way they're talking about their work. And so that is really generative. It can take a lot of time. What I don't like, I don't know if anybody wants to know this, but what I don't like is the grading, because I find it very very awkward with art making. Yeah. And the more structured it is, the more I resist it. So I'm pushing against that box, you know, like why? Because if I have students working on independent projects, how can I tell them it has to be in this week? You know, we all have deadlines, right? You have to get the Kresge grant, and I will tell them you have to get the Kresge grant in, otherwise it's closed. That's it. You have to wait until 2 years, you know, for your category. But at the same time, when things you're creating, how do you put those kind of artificial? Yeah. So I struggle with that.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one last quick question, which I'm curious about. And that is, you mentioned the word decorum. And I'm really curious about your perspective on any way you want to take this, but what came up for me was the question around what is the need to break down things like decorum and expected ways that we interact with one another in order to undo systems that are oppressive, whether we're talking about patriarchy, racism, the intersection of these across the board. But words like decorum or the expectation of how people do or don't call things out, etc. That's a huge question. We could have taken the whole time on that. So any quick hit on share
Man,
before we go out?
I don't think I want to go out on a high note with that with Christina. I think it's hard in the moment, in the place, in the situation to feel like empowered to do that. That's where I think that having our communities, having Bree mentioned the collectives, and like having that kind of strength, it builds your spine in a way to say like, wait a minute. But I know for me, I can talk the talk sometimes more than I can walk it. And I can express things visually and performatively, but I don't have a good answer. Maybe other people. Yeah.
I think that's a great answer. We each have our strengths and our ways that we show up, and we have the areas where we might feel we need to improve, and then the areas where we are improving and we're held by the community, held accountable by community, and held in moving forward in community. I think it's a great, I appreciate the answer. There's also a question in the chat that I'm going to ask you if you'll take a look at, because we are going to shift gears just based on time. And also, Melanie, if you have a moment to share any influences of yours. That's a question I didn't get a chance to ask, but for people who are interested in knowing more about where your work might come from, or to see the lineage that you might be pulling from, if there's anything there that you want to share as well, that would be great. With that, now's the time for that bio break. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Recording, and so feel free to be on video mute if you prefer to have that. Excited now to move on to the third artist for today of the 2020 Kresge Artist Fellows. That's Salakastar. And with that, I'm going to hand it right over to you to give some context, some intro for what we're about to see.
Hi, everybody. I'm so honored and excited to be here with everyone. So this is essentially my origin story. If you want to check out my work, I would suggest going to my portfolio, but this is more of a personal story time. So I hope you enjoy.
My name is Salakastar, and I'm an actor, singer-songwriter, poet, teaching artist, and creator, born and currently based in Detroit, Michigan. My work is rooted in the themes of healing, being at home in the body, and transformation. My biggest lesson in transformation came very early in my life when we moved from our big yellow house with a big, beautiful park at the end of the block to an abandoned building around the corner. Allow me to explain. According to the Detroit City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 37, Nuisances, Article 2-1, the council found that there are many unoccupied dwellings in the city which, because of their vacant status, constitute hazards to the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Permitting families and community groups to repair and occupy abandoned homes within the city will preserve the residential housing stock of the city, increase neighborhood stability, and provide needed homes for Detroit families. Section 37, Article 2-2. For the purpose of this program, a dwelling shall be considered abandoned if that dwelling is vacant, dilapidated, and open at the door or window, leaving the interior of the building exposed to the elements or accessible to entrance by trespassers. An applicant for a nuisance abatement contract shall agree to reside in the contract property as his or her sole residence for a 36-month period. A fixer-upper. That is an understatement. But we rolled up our sleeves, moved in, and got to work. There were a lot of negative comments and criticisms. I would never live there. It's dirty. It's dangerous. How could you live there? That's so ghetto. But for a single mother of 5 kids and an educator, it was a path to home ownership. And for a family of artists, it was a blank canvas. See, my mom is the ultimate artist. Dancer, singer, mixed media artist, designer, and master seamstress. And she made sure we were nurtured creatively, putting us into every program she could and immersing us in the arts from a very young age. Being on stage gave me a sense of power, purpose, and value that I didn't feel I necessarily had anywhere else. I could create other worlds, live other lives. Music was my escape into a world where I could be anything. I dreamt of being a movie star, being on television, being on Broadway, traveling the world with my music. When I told some people about these dreams, they suggested I do something more practical. But my mom always encouraged me. In fact, when I was born, Spirit told my mama that I would need a stage name. And that's how this baby got the name Salakastar. We knew my path. Let me tell you, it was not easy living in this house and doing the work to bring it up to code and make it a comfortable home. And it was not easy living in this neighborhood and in this city. I was very aware from a young age that so many things put us at risk. You feel vulnerable to the things they say should destroy you. Being Black, being female, poverty, experiencing and witnessing violence, being from Detroit. So you become strong and you become hard so that you cannot break. And you try to become perfect and you try to control everything you can. Despite all of the shame and embarrassment, despite the people who judged and criticized instead of helping, we transformed this home. We filled this dilapidated dwelling with love, laughter, and art. Courage in the face of ridicule. Intention in the face of hardship. Authentic alchemy. Having a vision and bringing it into manifestation. At the time, I didn't see how incredibly powerful this transformation was. I internalized the shame and judgment and the need to make it out. My solution was to get as far away from Detroit as I possibly could. So I got into one of the highest ranked acting conservatories in the nation and moved to New York. I worked very hard there. I got lead roles. I graduated with honors. I got an agent. I even booked a show before graduation. I was determined never to go back here, and I carried that shame and fear with me. I was still running from the things that filled me with fear. And, living in New York City got very lonely. Be strong, be hard, be perfect, be in control. Eventually, I found myself vulnerable to the very things I was running from. I was working multiple jobs just to have a roof over my head. I was auditioning and booking small roles here and there, but I had no artistic home. I think that theater and art had been my therapy for so long that when I didn't have that, things really began to fall apart. Be strong, be hard, be perfect, be in control. But how can you find strength without nourishment? What happens when you become so hard and rigid you finally snap into two under pressure? What happens when control and perfection live where freedom and acceptance long to reside? What happens when your fire, your passion is extinguished by all of the things you were running from? What happens? Depression, anxiety, disordered eating. Here I was, so close to my dreams geographically, but spiritually I was so far away. Was my mom wrong? Was I even Salakastar? So I asked for guidance from a higher power, and I was told to go home. Oh, no, I can't do that. I made it out. I can't make it in Detroit. I didn't want to go back to this. I didn't listen to that guidance, and in the span of 2 or 3 weeks, I lost all 3 of my jobs, my apartment, and some friends even. Point taken. I finally surrendered to spirit and stopped running from my fears and returned home to Detroit. I was nourished back to health with the love and support of my family, my community, therapy, and food. Here I found the time and space to heal. Literally, my apartment was half the price and twice the space. I was embraced by the artists and activists in Detroit and started to find my power as a creator again. I began meeting other people, especially Black women, who were healing. I became so in alignment with my purpose that I began to manifest incredible creative partnerships. I was learning how to create theater from scratch, write music, and to find and nurture my unique voice. Opening to spirit, I had a vision of blue, and I began to create from that space. The color blue lit that fire within my spirit again. I began to utilize that authentic alchemy I learned about a long time ago, turning depression into ecstasy, turning anxiety into trust, turning scarcity into abundance, turning my wildest dreams into reality. I realized that my tears were the same tears of my ancestors, and like so many of my peers, I was healing wounds going back generations. Why us? I don't know. But the time to heal is now. And all of the things that should have destroyed me, those are my superpowers. The things that we were shamed for were the very tools I needed in my life as an artist. Resourcefulness, vision, trust. Be strong, be hard, be perfect, be in control. No. Here, I find strength through nourishment, power through softening, and I release the need to be perfect and in control, and I lean into the joy of imperfection and curiosity. I founded my record label and production company, Salakastar Studios, last year, and my intention is to make and support work that extends a healing vibrational frequency in order to cultivate authentic alchemy, power, and transformation for the evolution of the human spirit. Whew. I am so excited and honored to release my first album, All Blue Part 1 Majorelle, independently this year. If we can trust our path, it will take us where we need to go. Fearlessness was foreign to me, but letting go of fear is necessary right now. The need to make it out, is replaced with the need to go within. And here, we can make a home inside of ourselves. Here, we can heal from anywhere.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm struck by how personal the series and today is in terms of just being able to actually see physical places and things that in a non-pandemic we'd be gathering in person, but in this way we're actually able to have views that we wouldn't otherwise. So I'm curious, one thing that stuck out for me was when you spoke about practical, and I'm really curious about practical versus impractical. And if you might share things about that, and I'm going to tie it into this question around resource too. If you want to put out in the world, what are abundantly like impractical resources that could come your way that would allow you, again, that ease and joyful path going first or going forward with your work. But I am curious again about how practical and impractical shows up for you historically and how it is for you now.
Sure. Yeah. I think, being from my background, I think when I would tell people what I wanted to do, I think they would project their fears onto me and say, oh, no, you got to do something where you have security. But I found that really the more I leaned into my practice, the more secure I became. I started, I was up until about 3 years ago, I was working in the service industry. And, the last service job that I had, I actually got attacked by a dog at work by my boss's dog. And I was like, okay, I'm done with this. So after that, I was like, I'm just working in my field, and then things just started to come along, and I'm still here, and I'm doing better than I was before I was fully leaning into my practice. So I think for me, definitely more cash, obviously, but also just opportunities to develop more of my work time and space to do that.
Yeah, it makes sense. And especially in the space of, I think if this last year and I'd even go last decade has taught us anything, is that security is often an illusion. The things that people have said, that's the secure path. There's nobody there that is going to say, oh, sorry, here's your replacement time or the other security by taking that advice that didn't turn out to be true for you. And I love what you're sharing about folks maybe projecting their own, whatever it is, dreams that didn't get pursued and justifications for why, or concerns or whatever may be going on. Yeah, so with that, in speaking about support for walking your own path and having security in yourself in that, there's a question in the chat asking for you to share a little about your use of tarot crystals and the color blue in your work.
Sure. So actually my good friend Paige, who asked a question, she got me into tarot. She's a wonderful tarot reader. And yeah, I can explain about the blue. A few years ago, I got this like vision of blue, and I started working with that color, writing music and creating images from there. And that has really carried me until this point. So I think really following artistically, like the vision that I've been given, again, like that's been able to like support my life. And it's and I think also the process of like trusting that is really important. And I think with crystals and tarot, and also yoga and meditation and other healing practices, those are the things that really keep me grounded, especially now, especially again, not giving into the fear of not being able to support myself or my practice. So when I wake up and I have those things, I'm able to really carry that through my day and I guess be successful.
Yeah, and it's this space that I'm hearing also a little bit coming in all the conversations today and through the series again about how there is the lack of security that is part of a human condition, and then there's the lack of security that comes from being an artist, and that second one is a condition that can be alleviated with more resources, retirement accounts, etc., so that folks actually know, like, when I'm doing my yoga, I'm dealing with the human condition, not only just the artist condition as well, and that some of these are things that abundance, again, that space of economic liberation being a component of full liberation and freedom to create whatever one wants to create without thinking about what an artist might, or an audience, how they might receive it, etc., being that space of creative freedom. And I'm struck also, but I'm going to stop with that. I was going to ask about the house where you mentioned from a yellow house to a blue house, I believe, at the beginning. So if you want to share on that, but first there's a question in the chat that is, how do you define success in such a personal field of work?
How do I define success? I think right now, just being able to be happy and comfortable and creative at home.
And in that also, it says, there's a question here around noting that your life is divinely aligned and that your share is a testament to that. And how do you trust so fully?
Well, that's been a process. I think just going back to moving from the big yellow house to an abandoned building around the corner. That happened when I was around 7 or 8. So it was a very like formative time. And like I said, at the, you know, I'm just going back to that time. And when I looked at that picture, because I hadn't looked at that picture in maybe 20 years or so, I had like a visceral reaction because there was a lot of fear, just because it's a scary looking place. But I think being able to not only witness that transformation, but to be a part of making that happen. And also just that, I think like my mother's just knowing that that would work and people being like, are you crazy? And I think like I think my life as an artist is kind of the same way. People not understanding, you know, not having a 9 to 5, and just trusting that I'll be okay. And I think in the past few years, I'm becoming more and more comfortable with trusting my path. And I think just kind of even the practice and the exercise of like kind of charting my path on the floor, it gave me a kind of a visual view of like, oh wow, this is divine.
And I noted also the space that it felt like in watching for me that there was a way of retelling your story in a different way, maybe from the way that you had the story in your mind previously. And is that something where, did I hear you correctly, that you just now for this video is the first time in like 20 years that you had looked at that photo? So
Yeah.
A fresh experience of looking at the story maybe from a different direction or a different frame.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I held on to a lot of shame, and a lot of it coming from experiencing poverty and thinking that my experience was maybe less than. I've actually never shown anyone those pictures. Like it's kind of something that I hid away. But I think just looking at the transformation, and just taking the shame out of it and being like, wow, this is actually something really incredible. And I gained skills from that, very practical skills, because I know now I can make a home anywhere, including within myself.
And are there ways that you see that potentially taking your work in new directions when you move forward from that knowledge and that undoing and unpacking of shame?
Yes, because I think creating from a place of thriving and abundance rather than surviving, I'm interested to see where that's going to take me. And I think also thinking about like my meditation practice, my yoga practice, and also sharing that with my community and the community of artists that I work with, especially now with so much violence happening outside. I think our ability to be within and create from a higher place and to really go above that kind of like low vibration is really incredible. And I think I'm able to create something that is otherworldly. So I think I want, someone, when they view my work or when they listen to it, I want them to be able to be transported to just a higher vibration. Because like I said, when I go on Twitter or when I watch TV, I'm literally seeing public executions, right? So it's like, what I have to go within and also be with my community to go within together and like to create just higher states, if that makes sense, and to heal from that outside trauma.
Absolutely makes sense. And want to note, we've got room for a couple more questions, so please put them in the chat if you have them. There's some notes already in the chat that I'm sure we'll see also afterwards, but just noting that your mother sounds incredible and thanking you for the vulnerability and authenticity that you're bringing to the conversation. And of course, yes to the higher vibrations and all that you're sharing. I'm curious if on the topic of ancestors or family and the role either or both of those play in the work that you're creating now and or that path or the practice of vibrations and raising vibrations.
Yeah, my ancestors play a huge role in the work that I make. I think just using my instrument, I'm a reflection of my ancestors. So now I'm working on being very intentional about the work that I do, the work that the people who I work with, and even the projects that I take on. I used to say yes to every audition, but now I'm very careful about how I want my image used, and I'm able to really be a lot more selective. So I'm looking for projects that are kind of on that higher vibration. And I'm finishing up my album All Blue Part 1, Majorelle, right now, but my next project is called Big Mama. And it's about my maternal ancestral line. Big Mama was my great grandmother, and there are a lot of Big Mamas in Black families. So I want to explore that Big Mama energy.
There's another question here in the chat asking if you'll share a little bit about your work in theater, working with a collective, and also your solo practice and the relationship between the two. And I'm wondering if any of those might be related to the work that's coming in the future as well, or if not, share about it however it shows up for you.
Sure. I'm an ensemble member at a host of people. 2018 Kresge Artist Fellows. And that's my home. That's where I make theater now. We're working on a new piece called Fire in the Theater. It's about free speech. We've been doing that virtually, which is way different. Usually we're breathing and talking and moving and writing in a room together. Hopefully we'll be able to be in the rehearsal room again soon. As far as my solo practice goes, you know, I am a collaborative artist. So with like my solo music, it's not really solo because I'm working with musicians and engineers and things like that. But I think I just make sure that my instrument is ready to go. So I do my yoga, lift weights, vocal exercises and things. And I just make sure that I have a clear channel. And as far as my work goes as an actor, I'm looking for an agent and a manager, and I'm looking for those types of projects that match my vibration.
So hearing that clear call for those folks who are going to hook you up with a manager, or are the manager or agent that are listening right now, or maybe on the recording at a future date, for those connections to absolutely come through. I know that also as we move in a little bit to wrapping up, that contact information for each one of the artists today will be shared in the chat. So making sure that people know exactly how to connect you when they're writing those large checks, so that you can move with ease and abundance going forward, where they can say, hey, I'm your agent that you've been looking for, and let's talk about it, all of those good things. So those are coming through. Also want to ask in terms of, you mentioned the idea of imperfection and embracing, moving into the space of acceptance and surrender, and finding the strength that's in those things that may have initially been wrapped in a sense of lack, or a sense of not being enough, etc. Is there more that you might want to share on that, whether it's for people listening where that really resonates, or about your journey and resources that you'd say, hey, here were things that supported me to move through that space?
Yeah. Wait, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Absolutely, especially because I have a way of having questions that are so not linear. This brain up here just does not form easy questions. So I feel for y'all when you have to take them. In terms of any resources that you might want to share that supported you moving from a place of feeling imperfection as a problem into embracing the imperfection and recognizing there's strength in imperfection.
Mm-hmm.
Anything, whether it's a resource like a book out there in the world that's like, hey, here's what helped me, or a guide, or you mentioned tarot, or whether it's just knowing this particular knowledge is something, or this practice got me through.
Yeah, so one of the books that I think is the most pivotal in that practice is called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Myss, MYSS. Really, really wonderful resource. And honestly, just being in Detroit with my community, being able to work with Morgan, being able to work with Bree, being able to work with Ian and Chris and Paige and a host of people. I think, again, having a meditation practice and being able to be clear about the things that I want and the things that I need is super helpful.
So knowing also, and I think this will be our last question unless we get the other one that drops in here. I've heard many artists comment about being told or believing that they needed to leave Detroit in order to make it. And that the experience of coming back and how confronting that might have been to make that choice or otherwise. And feel free to speak to that at all. But what I'm curious is, how can the city of Detroit, or the conditions of Detroit, those who help create the conditions of Detroit, make that one that makes it even easier for folks to come back, or to help undo the sense of need to leave in the first place? So it might be a choice, but to change that narrative about you have to leave. And I know it's changed a lot already from what I understand, but I'm just having experienced it. What do you have as in terms of advice for the powers that be in city of Detroit to have it be someplace where people know, I don't ever have to leave here because I'm heart and soul of this city, and the arts and culture sector thriving is critical, and I'm critical to that. So how can artists thrive even more than you do right now in Detroit?
Yeah, we need the infrastructure. I know Chris was saying in his talk, he was talking about, or they were talking about how Broadway was government funded. We need those things. We need it to look like how a lot of European countries fund their arts. And I think it's just, this place is just so fertile. And if those resources were, allocated to the arts, I think it would attract a lot more artists. I do, my friends from out of state, they're like, how is it there? Like, you seem to be doing well. And I'm like, it's fertile in a lot of ways, but in some ways it's dry. So we need more infrastructure. We need more industry here. I wish we were shooting more films here. I wish we were shooting more television. And I wish that they would use Detroit actors as well. Yeah, infrastructure and cash. And because I think, I think it was the idea, like, okay, you have to leave in order to be successful. And then when I came back, I noticed that certain people were able to stay here and be successful and build a life. But certain people, like, the messaging was, you have to leave. So I really do love it here. And I hope to be able to build a home here, as well as travel all over the world and work all over the world. So I think it's just such a good base. And I think the love and the community that we have here is like no other.
All right, thank you to all three of the artists today for sharing so generously and literally inviting us into your homes, into your practices, into your histories. The connections between each of you are very clear, and I wish we had so much more time to go into them. I invite everyone to check out those links that were earlier in the chat, where you can learn more about each of the artists that presented today, Salakastar, as well as Bree and Melanie. And thank everyone again for joining, both for all of the series and today. We have one more coming up, so I think information about that will probably be showing up in the chat here any moment. And please do remember to stay connected. Each one of us has something to offer to the arts community and to individual artists. It may be writing those big checks, but it also may be things that has to do with offering space. Also, just today, your time showing up, being here, asking questions, engaging in the conversation. That's absolutely critical. So thank you for doing it. I know Zoom and online is sometimes not the first thing that we want to do, and yet it is critical to keep those connections moving, even during this pandemic, when the Zoom is the format we have that keeps us safe and able to keep moving forward. And so you can register also for the salon that is the final one that's coming up later this month, Thursday, April 29th at 1 p.m. And again, I want to thank everyone on behalf of Kresge Arts in Detroit and all of the artists, and really appreciating the spotlight on the 2020 Kresge Artist Fellows. We'll see you next time.